So, my girlfriend has a younger sister who has cerebral palsy and autism, and although she's very smart, she can't really support herself fully and will probably need help and guidance for the rest of her life, which is perfectly okay. She's basically our adopted daughter. My girlfriend taught her sister how to walk and talk and basically everything she knows. One day, though, my girlfriend told me how there were three instances in her life where her sister basically broke character and told her how she was stuck and couldn't get out and that she was trapped and needed help desperately. Her sister talks in a very specific, kiddish and this cutesy way. She's very innocent and to this day, at 19 years old, talks to her stuffed animals like as if they are real. During the three times where she broke character, my girlfriend told me her sister spoke in a certain desperate and adult tone and made a face like she was scared for her life, and literally the next second her face would change and she would go back to the way she was before. And my girlfriend told me it would be like her sister didn't remember what just happened moments before. To this day, it scares her and makes her wonder what if her sister is trapped in a childlike state and sometimes has moments of clarity. I'm not sure. But when she told me, I could tell it was serious, and she has never brought it up ever since because of how much it creeps her out. Sometimes I get worried that one day she might break character and only I will be around and I won't know what to do. She's very sweet, and we love her just the way she is, but it creeps me out to think that what if her mind was being held hostage by another? Has anybody else had similar experiences? There was a cake dropped outside our house, just outside the gate of our front garden. The cake was dropped earlier in the day by a child, including this as my dad thinks it has something to do with the cake being dropped by an innocent, which maybe lured the man out. Anyways, my mom decided she was going to go out and clean the cake from the ground when she looked down and saw a tiny little man grabbing it and stuffing it into his pockets. She was absolutely shocked and taken aback by what she was seeing. The little man then started running away into our garden, but she said he would stop and look back to see if my mom was still watching him. She decided to follow him, and he kept looking back at her, but then he ran down our path, which leads to our back garden, and she said he just disappeared. I'm wondering if this was maybe a gnome or leprechaun or something similar to this. Has anyone ever heard anything like this before? So, I go to a relatively old college built in the 1800s, and there's a bunch of stories of it being haunted, but I don't really buy into it that much. I've been here a couple years already and haven't seen anything too weird, minus what I'm about to say, which is probably the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. My roommate is never here. She always just stays at home and commutes to school for classes, which means I basically live alone in my dorm. As an introvert, I could not be happier. After dinner, I usually just go back to my room, lock the door, and work on homework. So a few nights ago, I was at my desk working on my paper in the dark and listening to music on my phone. All of a sudden, the music stopped and my laptop switched off on its own. Neither the computer nor my phone would turn back on, like something had just disabled all the electricity in the room. At that point, I just kind of accepted my fate and decided that would be a good stopping point for homework. It was probably after midnight anyway, and the next day was a Saturday, so I didn't need to use my phone to set an alarm. I decided I'd probably just go to bed and let both devices charge. Less than a minute after everything shut off, there was a knock at my door. I remember walking to the door and going to look through the peephole, but after that, I remember nothing. I woke up in my bed the next morning on top of the sheets, which I never do, and didn't even remember going to bed. On top of that, when I checked the door, it was unlocked. I never leave it unlocked, even when I'm in the room. I will check the door 3 times an hour out of paranoia just to make sure I didn't forget to lock it. I have even turned around halfway to class to see if I remembered to lock the door. I figured it must have been my roommate who came to the room that night, and I was just so tired I don't remember. So I texted her to tell her she'd forgotten to lock the door last night, but she responded by saying she was never at the apartment. I thought she was lying or something, but then she FaceTimed me and she was in a completely different state. The only 2 people I would have opened the door for were her and campus security, and I have no idea why security would have been at my door past midnight, especially since I was making 0 noise. And no one else has a key, so I would have had to be the one to unlock the door. Nothing in my apartment was out of place or missing. I finally assumed that I must have dreamed the whole thing and that I'd somehow unlocked the door in my sleep. My phone and laptop were working fine, after all, and showed no signs of damage. A couple days later, though, I started telling my friend in class what happened, and as soon as I mentioned that my electronics stopped working, some other girl that I didn't even know butted in and asked, "Was there a knock on your door after?" This girl proceeded to match my story almost exactly. She was alone in her room, all the electricity shut off, there was a knock on her door, she went to check through the peephole, and she remembers nothing after that. Her only difference is that she woke up on the floor next to her bed and not on top of the bed. She says she also knows someone that this happened to, but she won't tell me who. I'm just thinking that if there's 3 of us, this may have happened to a lot more people that we don't know about. Has anyone experienced anything similar? Is there anything I should do about this? I don't think campus security would do anything about it, since nothing was stolen, I wasn't hurt or anything, and there aren't even any cameras in the building. Great security plan, I know. They barely even do anything about actual crime, so I'm pretty sure I'd get laughed at if I said anything. What was this? And what do I do? I am 24 years old, and since I was born, I was always interested in philosophy of mind, religions, and why they exist, and I was always a rational, scientific person, until I was 23 years old. A little backstory first. My vision has always been extremely good, never wore glasses or lenses, always a very visual person, one of those guys who constantly stops to look at trees because, like many of you, I'm sure, I recognize the sacredness in everything. I was always quite spiritual without even knowing what the spirit even is. I always felt also that my sessions of free thinking were guided by someone that was not me. Since I was a kid, I always used my imagination, and I was always interested about the first-person experience because I feel like the realms of philosophy and religion and science will one day merge. So since I was a kid, I always used my mind for what it is, a viewer. I always felt kind of guided in my thinking. I would see images, concepts, answers to questions I had about society, religion, and so on. I always felt like I knew something else before my birth, but never paid much attention to these thoughts, telling myself they were not real. When I was 21, I finally started to take meditation more seriously, and my exploration into my mind received a great upgrade. At 23 years old, I started to realize that the UFO phenomenon, to which I always felt attracted to, was probably real, and one day I was discussing this with my family at dinner. Of course, the members of my family were kind of surprised by the subject because they always saw in me a very smart person, and UFOs are for crazy people, according to popular belief. So mentally, I told my guides in my mind, I said, "If you really exist, and I am not talking to myself right now, that means you can listen to this. And if you can listen to this, you can show yourself to me. Now, if you do, I will give my life to this cause. If you do not, I will get a family and I will presume that I should do what my human peers tell me. Materialize on this physical plane so I can see you with my eyes, or the party is over and I will forget you forever." Next morning, I was up at 4:30. I didn't use cannabis the night before, so I was completely sober. I went upstairs and made me a coffee with the intention of working out. I started to walk towards the park, and not even a minute into the walk, I see my first UFO in my life. It was 5:02 in the morning of the 23rd of September in 2021, and my heart started racing because I knew it was them, my guides. I saw these 4 lights in the sky flying very fast in formation. Then the formation broke and they spiraled among themselves and disappeared one after the other. Extremely fast, extremely close, almost magical. Absolutely no sound at all, and it couldn't be a satellite. I always look up and I always know what I'm looking at. After some months of realizations, I asked them in my head to give me the answers of what this place, Earth, is, and they told me mentally, Alien Interview from Roswell Crash, written by Matilda. And I didn't know the book or its title before asking, of course. They didn't tell me this with words, but with images. I found the book and read it, and I was floored. I still don't know if these aliens are manipulating us and me, and they are actually enemies, but they are so subtle and they respect our free will so much that they don't give me this impression. It feels like they want to help us all. In the book, they basically told us that we are immortal spiritual beings and that we are trapped here because we are imprisoned. You cannot kill one like us, so you can only trap them. In the book, my favorite quote is, I sense your disbelief about you being a spiritual being. You want the proof of that? Be above your head now. For the first moment of my life, I realized the obvious. I am not my head or my body. I became aware that Errol, the alien, is an immortal spiritual being, and so are we all. Basically, according to Errol, the alien, we cannot remember our past lives because the people controlling Earth make us go towards a light that erases your spiritual awareness. And then on Earth, through mind control and false memories installed by the people we love, they ensure we cannot remember who we are or where we come from. Read the book before dismissing it, as it is written in the preface, what is true for you is true for you. Thank you for reading. We will rise. We will wake up from the dream. We are close. Or maybe I'm close to schizophrenia. It is definitely one of the two. Background. I lived in a border town growing up. Mexico was pretty safe at that time, and high school kids going across the border was no big deal, as our parents did it as well. It was the summer before I went to college, and I worked as a cocktail waitress at a nightclub catering to the white residents of the city as well as people in the Air Force Base. I was becoming friends with another waitress who was a blonde, blue-eyed girl, well off, and whose parents left her by herself at their house by the lake. I was poor and Hispanic, but she was always nice to me. The club closed at 2 a.m. If we wanted to have fun ourselves, we would have to go to Mexico because at that time, friends' parties were done. This girl had been dating a rich Mexican guy. She was 17 or 18 and he was 19 or 20. He was considered a puppy, rich Mexican. The incident. After one of our shifts, my friend asked if I wanted to go with her and her boyfriend to a party in Mexico. I agreed. We were picked up in a beautiful black car by his driver, and he had a couple of friends with him, all well off and good-looking. They took us to a club that knew them. As soon as we walked in, the waiters brought multiple bottles of good-quality liquor, mixers, and garnishes. I had a blast, and her friends were kind and respectful. I drank a little bit, not much. We were only there about an hour when the bars started to close. The guys suggested we go to Boys Town. For those who don't know about the U.S.-Mexico border, there is usually a red light district with drugs, drinks, and prostitution. I agreed to go because I felt safe with my current group, rich Mexicans probably well known, and I like adventure. I'm a bit of a risk taker. Any trouble would probably be from cops, and we would just give the crooked cops some cash. We take this fancy car through a dark dirt road outside of the small city until we see the flashing lights of Boys Town, like a movie set. We go to one of the bars and enjoy the show. It's a mix of drunk college boys, Mexican cowboys, and the desperate women looking for their mark. I was surprised. There really is a donkey show, but it's not what you think. The whole night, my friend's boyfriend and his friends had treated us to drinks. I was getting drunk and needed to use the restroom. I walked down a red-lit hallway and encountered a prostitute with only a see-through scarf around her hips. She smiled at me and curled her finger to beckon me to a small room. Being the curious girl I am, I was tempted. She was beautiful with wavy black hair. I smiled and started walking towards her. I suddenly felt strange. Surrounded, I guess, is the feeling. I stopped and started to feel very uneasy. She continued to try to lure me into one of the small side rooms. I shook my head and returned to the table with my friends. Another drink was waiting for me. I took a couple of sips and just felt uncomfortable. I told my friend that I didn't feel so well and asked them to stop buying me drinks. This is the scary part. She says, "We haven't been buying your last few drinks." Like nothing. What the fuck? I quickly turned to the bar and noticed that several men are looking my way. Someone I didn't know was sending me drinks. I told the group that I had to go and that if we didn't leave, I would make a scene. We left. I headed home and didn't speak. I felt super wired and amped. I haven't felt like this before or after. I was off and feeling out of control. I got home at about 6 a.m. My mother was waking up and was wondering what I had done. I told her I had hung out with my friend, her boyfriend, and their friends, and I proceeded to stay up wired for hours, trying to act normal. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but I think someone was trying to hurt me or trick me. I was a pretty girl who was poor. If I disappeared, so what? Was that prostitute trying to get my money, or was she luring me into a trap? Who was buying me drinks that ended in me feeling out of control? We all make dumb decisions in life, but in this case I was stupid, very stupid. I arranged to meet a guy off Tinder, but because of my heightened anxiety about driving, I arranged for him to pick me up outside my place. I had been talking to him for a few weeks at least, but that is not redeemable, and I know that. The choice I made on this day could have ended me, but thankfully I'm still around to tell the tale. The guy picked me up in his car and told me he planned to take us out for sushi. I love sushi, so I thought, great. He put in the name of the restaurant into his GPS, and we were off, making pleasant conversation on the way there until I started seeing woods as I looked out my window. I felt very confused. We were supposed to be going to town, not into the wilderness in the middle of nowhere. Fear hit me hard then. He said, "I swear the GPS is taking me through here. I didn't choose this path. Please, just get us back to civilization," I said. My eyes were wide, and I must have looked like a deer in headlights. His face was really apprehensive, so he must have known that I was scared completely shitless. Oh my God, I thought to myself, I should have just conquered my anxiety about driving and met him somewhere public. Or, better yet, not met with this guy at all. What the fuck was I thinking? I'm going to get murdered here in these woods. I tried checking my phone to see if I could assist him with the GPS, and that's when he said those spine-chilling words, "There's no signal out here." I remember just thinking to myself to try and look calm. Don't let him think you suspect he's onto something. But man, did I feel terrified. The tips of my fingers were cold while I was simultaneously sweating. If he was going to kill me, part of me wanted him to get it over with so I wouldn't be left in anticipation. His forehead was perspiring. He kept saying, I swear I'm not doing this. I'm trying to get us back en route to the sushi place. I said, I don't care about sushi anymore. Just get us to a gas station, anywhere with people at this point. He said, I don't have a shovel or weapon in my trunk or anything, if that's what you're thinking, which did little to calm my nerves. We finally reached the restaurant after what felt like an eternity. I'd never been so scared in my life. I didn't have much of an appetite, and I was physically trembling when we arrived, but I figured he didn't kill me when he had the chance, so I guess it was safe now to continue with our date. I already planned on taking an Uber home because I didn't want to go through that experience again. I was shocked out of my mind when he then asked, "So, when do you think we'll have sex?" I nearly choked on a piece of sashimi. What? I didn't know where this was coming from, and I didn't know how he could ask me something like this now on a first date when he literally saw me pale as a ghost just moments ago. You know, like, how long will you make me wait for sex? A day, a week, a month? I stared at him, dumbfounded. I couldn't respond because I was utterly speechless in that moment. "Well, I can't wait a whole month, I'm telling you now," he said. I didn't say anything, and the rest of the date was insanely awkward. I said goodbye as I took my Uber home, and only seconds after my driver pulled out of the restaurant parking lot, he texted me to say that he doesn't think it will work out with me because he needs a girl with a higher libido. I didn't argue, I just texted back a simple, "Okay," ready to be done with this man. When the Uber driver drove me home, he did not take me through the wilderness pathway of a potential murder site. He took me home through streets, other cars, lights, the sweetest scene to my immense relief. I couldn't help but wonder why my date had to take me through an hour drive through the wilderness to get to the restaurant, but it only took the Uber driver 15 minutes to get me home from the same location. The whole thing was chilling. I don't know if my date planned on anything sinister or if it was an honest mistake, but I am glad I made it out alive. I learned a tough lesson that night, one that I should have already known, but that I foolishly ignored for some reason. Don't let strangers from a dating app pick you up in their cars. When I was 18, my boyfriend, Jake, 21, and I spontaneously decided to go to Canada to go bar hopping. It was a few hours away from our home, so we made the trip. After getting settled in the hotel, we went to the first bar. We had a drink, then went in search of a new bar. Jake and I were chatting and walking when a man in a big puffy coat stopped and introduced himself as Ian. He noticed we were speaking English and invited us to go bar hopping with him. Turned out he lived just a few hours from where we lived. After a few bars, we met up with two of his friends and went in the strip club. Ian paid our cover charge and drinks with a huge wad of cash. I had never seen that much before. We started talking about weed, and Ian invited us to his hotel room to smoke. I had had way too much to drink at that point, off being sick in the bathroom after one puff. Thankfully, Jake wasn't that drunk, and we both eventually made our way back to the hotel. What a crazy night. The next morning, after a hangover breakfast, we were walking to our car to leave when all of a sudden, Ian and his friends start calling our names. We all remarked how strange it was to run into each other again. Ian invited us all for a smoke at his friend's house. It was a shady-looking, run-down apartment. We smoke, and somehow the topic turned to how Ian makes so much money. Without directly saying it, I could tell he was into drug smuggling, possibly over the border. Ian suggested that I could make some good money doing the same. My heart dropped, and I immediately felt uncomfortable, unsafe. I needed to get out of that apartment, that city, that country. Jake looked over and saw how freaked out I was. We casually played it off. "Yeah, okay," like he was joking, but Ian's friends started nodding their heads, suggesting where I can hide it. Jake gave Ian his real phone number, why, I don't know, and we said our goodbyes, and we had a long drive home. Jake is driving, and shortly after we take off, we see Ian's car behind us. Very weird. We make a few turns, got a little lost, and he was still there. Jake made a few more erratic turns just to lose him. We both did not have a good feeling about Ian anymore. Finally, we made it across the border, no Ian in sight. It was a weird drive home. A week or two later, Ian called up Jake on the phone. I have no clue what was said, but I know we never picked up a call from him again. Maybe it was a close call, maybe not, but I got that deep gut-sinking feeling that something bad was going to happen if we were in Ian's presence any longer. Listen to your gut feelings. Last December, I was visiting my family down in Florida, and we spent some time in Treasure Island. My brother and I took my dog down to the beach at about 2 a.m. to play some fetch and drink and have a good time. If you walk along the water, you can reach a few restaurants/bars and hotels line the beach. Out of nowhere, we see someone walking pretty quickly in our direction from over there, and a few moments later we can make out that they're being followed. My dog is arguably pretty well trained. We work search and rescue. And I've never once had her run off without permission, and never once has she not instantly returned when we called. But that changed that night. She was about 5 feet from me, and I saw her hackles shoot up, and I went to grab her collar, but she took off in a full sprint, making some truly terrifying barking and growling sounds. We obviously took off after her, and she reached the first person and stopped between them and the people behind them. She was barking and growling and lunging, and I finally caught up and put her on a leash. She's never reacted in that manner. It was so crazy. The group following her ended up being 3 men that were probably in their 30s. They started booking it in the other direction. I turned around, and the person being followed was a young woman around my age. We asked if she was okay, and she just broke down in tears and collapsed into my brother. My dog insisted she get on the ground for some excited pup kisses and a soaking wet cuddle, which they both seemed to enjoy. She was far too overwhelmed to talk, so she got into her phone and rang her friend's number to have us talk to her. We were able to figure out where she was staying and walk her back to her hotel, where we met up with her friends, and we all exchanged numbers to talk at a later time. The next day, we all got together, where we learned she had gone out for a walk on the beach, stopped for a drink at the bar, drank a bit, then just wasn't feeling right. So she left the bar and soon noticed 3 men left after her. She had been walking for about a mile at that point, terrified and slowly getting more and more fucked up. She doesn't remember much about the night, and we knew she was probably on something, but we had no clue she'd been drugged. We're still friends now, and we're all going to meet up for spring break when we'll be back in Florida. I've never been more proud of my dog and more grateful that we were in the right place at the right time. I hate thinking about what could have happened. So to those 3 men, let's never meet again. Hello, little Vickies. Thanks so much for listening. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday by 5 p.m. Pacific. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the like button, as it's very helpful to my growth here on YouTube. If you have something to suggest or just want to say hello, please leave a comment. I always reply. If you happen to have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it more than I can possibly say. And until next time, be good.